My name is Jake, and I've been working as a private investigator for over 8 years here in Chicago. During this time, I've seen just about everything, from marital affairs to cases of missing people who ended up coming home as if nothing had happened. But there's one specific type of case that always leaves me with that strange feeling in my stomach, you know? These are situations where completely normal people simply vanish for a few hours and then reappear without any logical explanation for what happened. Today I'm going to share with you 3 real cases that came to me, and believe me, these are stories that will make you rethink how easy it is for a person to simply disappear, even in this day and age. The first case happened in late 2023. A woman named Sarah, 34 years old, an employee at a marketing company in downtown Chicago, contacted me completely desperate. She told me that on the previous Thursday, around 2 in the afternoon, she left the office to grab a coffee at the Starbucks across the street, as she had done practically every day for more than 2 years. Her routine was always the same: take the elevator down from the 12th floor, cross Michigan Avenue, buy her usual grande latte, and return in a maximum of 15 minutes. But this time, Sarah never made it to Starbucks. In fact, she doesn't remember absolutely anything between the moment she left the elevator in the lobby and when she woke up sitting on a bench in Lincoln Park, more than 5 miles away from her office. When she regained consciousness, it was almost 7 at night. 5 hours had passed, and she had no idea how she had gotten there. What caught my attention most in Sarah's account was the precision of the details she could remember from the moments before and after the blackout. She remembered perfectly the conversation she had with her coworker before leaving. She remembered the smell of fresh bagels coming from the break room when she passed through the corridor, even the elevator music that was playing. And after the blackout, she could describe every detail of that bench in Lincoln Park: the chipped paint, the noise of cars on Lakeshore Drive, the extreme thirst she felt. But between these 2 moments, absolutely nothing, as if someone had simply erased 5 hours from her life. What made me even more uneasy was when she showed me her shoes. They were completely clean, with no signs of walking or wear. Someone who walked 5 miles through Chicago should have much dirtier shoes, especially in November, right? Sarah sought me out because her co-workers were starting to treat her strangely. Some insinuated that she had made up the whole story to justify leaving work early. Others thought she was having some kind of mental breakdown. But I met Sarah personally, talked to her for more than 3 hours, and I can guarantee that she was being completely honest with me. There's something in a person's gaze when they're lying, a specific way of looking away or forcing details that don't add up. Sarah showed none of these signs. On the contrary, she seemed genuinely haunted by what had happened to her. The investigation I conducted was quite thorough. I managed to get access to the security cameras of the Willis Tower where she worked, and indeed, the footage shows Sarah leaving the elevator in the lobby at 2:05 in the afternoon, exactly as she had told me. She appears walking toward the exit doors with the same naturalness as always. But here comes the strangest part. In the street cameras on Michigan Avenue, Sarah never appears. It's as if she had simply vanished into thin air between the building's doors and the sidewalk. I checked all the cameras within a 6-block radius and nothing. Sarah had simply disappeared for 5 hours and reappeared on the north side of the city. The second case was reported to me by a man named Mike, a 28-year-old Uber driver. Mike worked mainly during the night shift from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., doing rides throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. He was an experienced guy, knew the city like the back of his hand, and was always very careful about safety. In the early morning hours of a Sunday in March, around 2:30 a.m., Mike was heading home after dropping off a passenger in Wicker Park when he decided to stop at a 24-hour gas station on the Kennedy Expressway to fill up and use the restroom. So far, everything normal. He parked the car, went inside to prepay for gas, filled the tank, and entered the convenience store to use the bathroom. According to what he told me, it was exactly 2:43 in the morning when he looked at his phone before entering the restroom. The next thing Mike remembers is driving on a completely unknown rural highway, surrounded by cornfields he had never seen before in his life. His phone's GPS showed that he was almost 120 miles from Chicago, somewhere in rural Indiana. It was 6:15 in the morning. 3.5 hours had passed, and he had no idea how he had ended up in that place. The car's gas tank was nearly empty, indicating that he had driven a considerable distance, but Mike couldn't remember absolutely anything about this trip. Not leaving the gas station, not getting on the highway, not any stops he might have made along the way. Mike sought me out a few weeks later because he was afraid of developing some kind of neurological condition. He had never had blackout episodes before, didn't use drugs, drank only occasionally, and was in perfect physical health. What disturbed him most was the impossibility of explaining how he had managed to drive for more than 3 hours in a state where he apparently wasn't conscious of what he was doing. Anyone who has ever driven knows that it's impossible to do this on autopilot, especially for such a long distance and on highways he had never traveled before. During our conversation, Mike showed me something that gave me chills. In his phone's Google Maps history, there was a saved route from that night, showing exactly the path he had taken from the gas station to the place where he regained consciousness. The route made no sense. It passed through back roads and county highways, made several unnecessary detours, as if whoever was driving was deliberately trying to reach a specific place through the most complicated path possible. When I analyzed the route history in detail, I discovered that his car had stopped for almost 40 minutes at an isolated location in the middle of nowhere, a place that apparently had nothing but a gravel road and some farmland. Mike couldn't remember stopping anywhere, much less staying parked for so long. I asked if he had noticed anything different about the car when he regained consciousness, if it was dirty, if anything seemed out of place. He told me everything seemed normal, except for one thing he only noticed later. The driver's seat was adjusted to a slightly different position than he usually used, as if someone taller than him had driven the car and adjusted the seat to their height. The third case was the most disturbing of all, and was reported to me by a 17-year-old girl named Emma. Emma was returning from her high school in Evanston on a Tuesday afternoon, taking the same CTA bus she had taken every day for more than a year. She lived with her aunt in Rogers Park, and the trip back home lasted an average of 45 minutes. Emma always sat in the same seats on the bus, always got off at the same stop on Sheridan Road, always followed the same path home. It was a routine she knew by heart. But that day, something went terribly wrong. Emma remembers being on the bus, looking out the window and seeing the familiar shops and landmarks that marked the route to her house. The next thing she remembers is walking on a completely strange street, with houses she had never seen before, in a part of the city where she had never been. When Emma regained consciousness, it was almost 9 at night. She had lost more than 4 hours and was more than 10 miles from home, somewhere on the south side, in a neighborhood she didn't even know existed. The strangest thing is that she was walking normally, as if she knew exactly where she was going. But the moment she realized where she was, a feeling of total panic took hold of her. Emma told me that she had never in her life felt such intense fear as in that moment. It wasn't just the fear of being lost, it was something much deeper, as if something terrible had happened to her and she couldn't remember what. What bothered me most about Emma's case was the family's reaction. When she finally managed to get home, it was past midnight. Her aunt was desperate, had called the police, all the relatives, was ready to organize a search for her missing niece. But when Emma tried to explain what had happened, the family didn't believe her story. They thought she had made it all up to hide that she had ditched school and gone out with some boyfriend. The police themselves, when contacted, treated the case as a runaway situation and filed the report without investigating more deeply. Emma sought me out because she was afraid that it would happen again. During our conversation, she told me some details that made me realize there was something much more serious happening. When she regained consciousness on that strange street, she wasn't carrying her school backpack. The backpack had simply disappeared, along with all her textbooks, notebooks, and school supplies she was carrying. Even stranger, she was wearing a sweater she didn't remember putting on that morning. It was a simple gray sweater, but it wasn't hers. Emma was absolutely certain that she had left home wearing her red Northwestern High School hoodie. When I asked where the hoodie was, she told me she never found it again. I checked with Northwestern High School Emma's attendance record for that day, and indeed, she had attended all classes normally. I talked to her classmates, and they all confirmed they saw her leaving school at the normal time, wearing her school hoodie. One of her friends even told me that Emma seemed kind of strange that afternoon, quieter than normal, as if she was worried about something, but nothing that called much attention at the time. I investigated the 3 cases for several months, looked for patterns, connections, anything that could explain what had happened to these people. What intrigued me most is that the 3 cases had no apparent relationship to each other. Sarah, Mike, and Emma didn't know each other, frequented completely different parts of the city, had totally different ages and lifestyles. But they all shared something in common. They had lost several hours of their lives under completely inexplicable circumstances. During the investigations, I discovered that similar cases are much more common than we imagine. I talked to other private investigators and Chicago PD detectives, and several of them told me they had already encountered similar situations. People who simply disappear for a few hours and reappear without any memory of what happened during that period. The difference is that most of these cases are never officially reported because families are afraid that the person will be considered mentally unstable, or because they think no one will believe the story. What disturbs me most about these cases is not just the mystery itself, but the sense of vulnerability they bring. If completely normal people can simply disappear for hours in broad daylight, in a city full of security cameras, with GPS tracking and people everywhere, that means any of us could be next. And perhaps the most frightening thing of all is the possibility that this has already happened to us and we simply don't remember. To this day, I haven't been able to find a satisfactory explanation for any of the 3 cases I've reported here. Sarah returned to her normal routine, but now always tells someone when she's leaving the office, even for coffee. Mike stopped driving for Uber and got a daytime job at a logistics company. Emma transferred to a different school closer to home, and now her aunt always picks her up after classes. They all continue their lives, but I know they carry with them the mark of that inexplicable experience. If any of you have ever gone through a similar experience, or know someone who has, leave it in the comments below. Cases like these are more common than we imagine, and the more people report their experiences, the greater the chance of finding some pattern or explanation. And if you enjoyed this account and want to hear more real cases that came to my desk, Don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Every week, I bring true stories that will make you think twice before going anywhere alone.